We are very, very excited to be joined by our next guest, a comedian, a comedy writer, and now an author of America, Let Me In. Felipe Torres Medina is here. Good morning, Felipe. How you doing?
Hi, Gene. Thanks for having me. Hey, Greg.
Hello.
It is. I was so amazed. I texted you or I emailed you last week, and I said I would love a copy of your book, which I don't know how you did that. Seriously, that is the fastest anything has ever come through the mail. Do you know Louis DeJoy personally?
But my incredible book agent, Andrew Blatt, at William Morris Endeavor, and her assistant, Caroline, who mobilized because I was not home. I wanted to, if I had been home, I would have mailed it to you myself. But I was, uh, I was doing a book event in San Francisco, so I just emailed them and was like, "Can you please send a book to Jane?" And they were very
Whoosh!
quick.
It was. I couldn't believe
I
it.
think they sent it before you even asked because literally we got it. We're like, how is this here
How
now?
is this possible?
This is how easily we are like amazed. We're like, the mail is so fast.
Well, now you are going to be in the area, correct, on the 10th.
Yes, on the 10th, I will be in Milwaukee at Boswell Books doing a
Oh,
book event with my wife, who is also an author and an Emmy Award-winning comedy writer. She writes for Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. And so we'll be in conversation talking a little bit about America and about my book about immigration, my funny book about immigration.
yes.
And that's an important thing to keep in mind. This is a very serious topic, obviously, especially in the days that we are living in right now. But you take a very lighthearted approach to explain to people all of the different processes people have to go through if they want to immigrate here, including, I had no idea, Felipe, until I looked at your book, how many different visas there are.
And that's not all of them. That's just the ones that I found like fun to write about. That's yeah.
I
Because
mean,
there's
how
a
many?
lot of really boring ones.
Yeah.
There are, but there are exceptions, for if a company wants to expand, if you want to come here
Mhm.
to start a business, if you want to do, I mean, it is remarkable how I had no idea. I had no idea. And for me, a native of this country, if I find this confusing, I can only imagine how confusing it is for people who want to move here.
Well, it's funny because to me, what's really interesting, having been here and been an immigrant in this country for 12, 13 years, I came here in 2013, so 12 years almost now, um, is that Americans have a lot of opinions on immigration. Everyone in America has an opinion on immigration, but very few people know how the system really works. And you see it all the time in social media, and you see it all the time in conversation, with your neighbors, your friends. Everyone's like, "Oh, well, they just need to do this, they just need to do that." And it's like,
Just go
well,
through the process.
exactly. Do things the right way, which
Right.
to me is the biggest myth that exists out there, because the right way changes all the time, and the right way is, even now we saw like day one of the second Trump administration, the right way was to apply for asylum using an app that the government had created, and they shut down that app within hours of the second administration starting. Now, you can debate whether that's good or bad. That's everyone's entitled to their opinion about what that is. But the truth of the matter, the objective truth, is that the right way was to do that, and they just decided actually that is no longer the right way. You cannot do that. So the idea of coming here the right way is such a myth because it's shifting sands. It changes all the time.
And we see that, unfortunately, with people in certain immigrant populations that were granted, say, temporary protected
Yeah,
status,
like TPS, exactly.
TPS, and now that was legal. That was
Yeah.
legal. These people are here legally, and then the Trump administration decided, yeah, we're going to revoke that TPS, and now they all have to leave, and they've been here for 20 years.
Yeah, and I think it also is a testament to the failure of the system itself. This is supposed to be a funny book, and I really don't want to get too bogged down on the technicalities of everything, but TPS is in and of itself, it's in its name, it's temporary. And these people have been here for 20 years, and they should have a way to stay and to remain and they've made this place their home. But what really this proves is that there hasn't been any comprehensive immigration reform in 30 years since Bill Clinton was president. And so we have a system that's like we've been papering over the cracks for 30 years.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it's become this thing where someone can just come in and say like, well, I'm removing the temporary out of the temporary protected status. The temporary element is over. And so, oh crap, we should have done the reform so that this didn't happen.
Right.
And that's the thing too for me, Felipe. By the way, if you're just joining us, we are talking to Felipe Torres Medina, who is the author of America Let Me In, a choose your immigration story, and we're talking about the book and the process. And one thing that I feel like, if you can take a step back, I'm speaking for myself right now. You see the left kick the can down the road because I feel like they were afraid to make hard choices or say the hard things out loud,
Yes.
Whereas Republicans now just get to say exactly what they've been thinking for a long time. And this is where we are because what they are doing seems like, quote, some movement. Like there's been very little movement, but because they're doing something, people will see this as, well, this is a start at least, right? We'll fix it later. We'll bring the people back who got that. Those were all mistakes. But the problem is we're seeing even the mistakes. They're like, nope, they can stay down in El Salvador or whatever country they're going to. And I mean, I just feel like it's, as you just said, it's a failure of decades for both sides to really have a frank conversation about a topic that at the end of the day, not everyone is going to agree on a solution.
Yeah, 100%. And look, the system exists and there are ways to do it, but I think a little bit of the point that I try to make in the book and a little bit of the things that I want to point out is the satire that exists in the book is that the system works if you have money. That to
Yes.
me was like one of the biggest things that I found out doing all the research for the book. I found it out firsthand with my own immigration experience, but there's also all the other kinds of visas and in truth, like having money is the biggest hack. And what we've created is a system where we are rewarding having money over many other things that we might need. There's genuine examples in other countries of how things could work differently. I remember Pete Buttigieg, when he was running for president in 2020, suggested something that I don't know if it would have worked, but it would have been different. That was called the Heartland visa, which was visas for skilled workers in jobs that are needed in particular parts of the heartland where there are no people who can do those jobs. And so that's kind of similar to the way that Canada issues province visas.
Yes.
And I don't know if it would have worked, but it would have been something and it would have been different. And we would have talked about immigration not as something that needs to be corrected or vilified. We would have talked about it as a way to fulfill the promise of America, right? To fill jobs, to make communities better. The inaction on the left leads to the discourse of they're eating the cats and the dogs.
Yes.
That is a straight line. If you create a community, if you create a sense of like these people are coming here to work, these people are coming here to build community, rather than they're on temporary protected status, technically it's legal, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it really, just ignore it. You create that straight line. Whereas if you form a narrative around immigration as a positive, which it is a positive for our country, and we can see it, it's tangibly a positive economically, then you can avoid these narratives and these conversations about immigration is all bad, because people in their communities will see that it isn't all bad.
It sounds like to me, Felipe, and I am not a very smart person, that you are saying that what we need to do is in the overarching theme of it is come together, have a long conversation about this and come up with solutions. Because what I'm hearing from you is just these are trying to create maybe not the perfect, maybe not permanent, but something better than we have, because that's how we move forward. And I know as a comedian, that's what you signed up for, is to become an explainer of these issues to the people out there. Because I'm a comedian too. I know everyone looks to me for advice. I'm like, I have a political science degree. Don't ask me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's the other thing. I've been touring with this book for a little bit, thankfully, and I've been able to go to all sorts of parts of the country. I was in Boston, where like the week or the 2 weeks after ICE detained this student at Tufts University,
Hmm.
who has now thankfully been released. And I was in Miami last month, and it's one of those things where you can see how the current administration and their policies are affecting the communities in a way that's very visceral and real. And in the end, I'm like, but I'm a comedian. I totally feel the fear, and I totally feel the sadness. And it is really sad, but how about some jokes? Because that's the only way I can, you know.
Well, and we do that on this program
Yeah.
too. We are living in very serious times. We all appreciate that, and we talk about that a lot. But for the last half an hour of our show, Felipe, we call it audio sorbet, where we talk about silly, non-important things, and
Yeah.
then we wrap up the show with "This shouldn't be a thing," because I just think if we don't take a moment to laugh about something, we're all going to self-destruct.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Um, I could ask you 1,000. I have other questions I want to ask you. Mainly, I want to talk to you about just your experience with that process too, and we can talk about that more when we come back. Because, as you said, you are an immigrant. You've been here for 12 years. You know that process. You've gone through it, and you have a unique outlook from it's not you work on a television show, so I imagine that they may look at it as like, well, you are working in an industry, you are a skilled worker in that sense, and trying to figure out what your journey through this process has been versus what other people may go through. And I'm interested to hear about that from you as well. So,
But as you mentioned, Felipe, it takes money. It
Mhm.
takes money.
Yeah.
If you want to emigrate here, this is an L1 visa. We're not going to go into this a whole bunch, but if you want to file for an L1 visa, it is going to cost you $460, $500, $190, $2,500. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It's just fees. Yeah, I think that was my wife's idea when I was writing those. The book has explainers on all these visas. So it's like, I think you should list how the fees
What
in
it
all these
costs.
kinds of visas,
Mhm.
because
Absolutely.
it actually helps your prove your point.
We're going to continue our conversation with Felipe Torres Medina. He is a comic, a writer, and the author of the book America, Let Me In. Stay close. You are listening to Matt Nair on Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll be right back. Good morning. Welcome back to Matt Nair on Air. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, Dr. Slide on the board. Coming to you from our studio at Radio Park in Racine. Join us, call or text at 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. Coming after the 10:30 news, audio sorbet for today. You know, there's a national day for everything.
Mhm.
National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, National Yoga Day, whatever day. What should be your national day?
National
What are we
Greg
missing?
Day. I like
National,
it.
beyond just National Greg Day.
Yeah.
What would be your day? You need a day. What is your national day? That's our audio sorbet coming up after the 10:30 news. We'll wrap up the show as we always do with This Shouldn't Be a Thing. Today it's the You're in Trouble Now edition. Stay tuned for that. Currently, our guest is an author. He writes for late night television, and he wrote America, Let Me In, a Choose Your Immigration Story. Felipe Torres Medina is here. It's a wonderful, lighthearted look at our immigration system. It's a lighthearted way to look at what a mess our immigration system is.
There it is. And earlier, I was alluding to the journey that you had as far as your immigration travels, and from coming here to where you are right now in America. I'm not saying like what's your status, but like just what your experience is. Because honestly, you working in television, the only thing I have is listening to John Oliver talk about his, and he said even as a guy who started on television, it's still a scary process. It's a long, expensive process with hoops you have to jump through. And I just wanted to know if you could speak on your journey thus far and what you've gone through.
Yeah, it's a scary, long, and expensive process. I moved here in 2013, I came here to study. I came on a student visa. And after that, I did something called OPT. And this stuff is all in the book,
Right.
told in a like slightly fictionalized version of my life as part of one of the paths you can take in the book, because as the title suggests, it's kind of interactive. So you can pick different kinds of visas, different kinds of stories, and see which one you get. But one of these is mine. So I got something called OPT, which is what students get to be able to work here for a year. Some students get 3 years if they're in STEM. I was in the arts, so I only got 1 year. And after that, I got something called an O1 visa, which is an alien of extraordinary ability visa, which is a ridiculous name. And you can tell how, even as I was starting to like become a comedian here, I was like surrounded by the absurd.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that
Lots
this
of
thing is,
material.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
kind of, because this visa is called Alien of Extraordinary Ability. It makes you sound like you're like in the X-Men, or you're like Alf, like,
You are ET. You
made
are
it.
ET, essentially.
Alf reference. Yes.
And so, you know, uh, I was starting to kind of like come to terms with all that. And also I had a lot of friends asking me like, oh, like, well, I had, again, these are like young liberal progressives in New York being like, oh, but you went to school here, so you're fine, right? And I had to be like, what? No,
No.
you have no idea how the immigration system works. Like, no, I have to get like visas, and I have to like do it under certain time frames. And if I don't do it, I have to leave. I had issues with uh, professors at my university. I went to Boston University, a great school. I learned a lot, but I had professors who had no idea how the system worked. So they were like, "Oh, well, you can just get like a barista job." Because I went for to get my master's in screenwriting, and they were like, "You can just move out to LA and like get a barista job and write." And I was like, "I can't. That's like legally not allowed if you're on a student visa. Even if you get a work permit, you have to work in your area of expertise on the thing you went to school for. So you can't just get like a day job, a survival job, and then like work on your art on the side until you get like the big break, kind of like the idealized vision of how
Right.
you make it in Hollywood."
Can you just imagine that was the fix? Like, just hey, everybody, just go work at Starbucks or a coffee shop. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I think that ultimately is the root of the problem too. Is that you think of the problem with this discussion being those who disagree and want to do extreme things, but the bigger problem, I would say, are those who support you as a person and being here, but know almost nothing about it. So just think, well, as long as I support them, good work on me. I'm good to go. You know what I mean? So
Right.
they alleviate themselves the responsibility of being proper advocates versus saying just like,
You'll be fine.
I say this all the time. I don't know. I think you should ask an expert because I can't tell you that answer. I don't know this experience. Ask Felipe, but don't ask Felipe. He's got other things to do. Buy his book.
Well, you can ask me, you can buy the book, but I do have to point out that I am not an immigration lawyer or an activist. I am a comedian.
Right. Important distinction.
Wait a minute. I thought all comedians were activists. That's what I've been told these past few years. If you have a podcast, you are basically a humanitarian
That's true.
advocate.
That's true. If you have a podcast, you speak the truth. Joe Rogan taught me that.
Felipe Torres Medina is our guest. He's the author of America, Let Me In, a Choose Your Immigration Story. It's very funny. You should pick it up.
And you're going to be here. You're going to be in Milwaukee on Thursday at Boswell Books. I will make sure to put the information on our show notes, and I'm pretty much sure I'm going to come down there and see. You said you and your wife are going to be there, right?
Correct. It's there. It's at 6:30 p.m. at Boswell, and
Perfect.
it's a lovely little bookstore. We love
It
it.
is.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm very excited.
I'll put that in the show notes, and we'll get down there and see you. And thank you so much, and congratulations, Felipe.
We would love to have you back. There's a lot
so
more to
much.
discuss. I would love to hear some of the comments you're hearing from folks after you address them at these appearances. So we will be in touch. And thank
Absolutely.
thank your publicist again for this is the fastest book that has ever gone through the mail. It's a miracle. We have news coming up next. Stay close. You are listening to Matt Nair on air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. Thank you so much, Felipe.
Thank you for having me.